Good morning, bright and early from Glasgow and COP26. Welcome to this EU Ocean Action Day. Minister Ribera, Commissioner Sinkevicius online. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Lorelei Picourt. I'm the Secretary General of the Ocean and Climate Platform. I'm here to quickly deliver some welcoming remarks. First of all, let me thank the EU Commission and especially the GMT, the European Bureau for Conservation and Development, the Plymouth Marine Laboratory, the Because the Ocean Initiative, of course, and the Ocean and Climate Platform for organizing this event. It's the third EU Ocean Action Day at a COP, at the UNFCCC COP, so we're very excited to be here. It's very nice to see some of you in real life, so it's very exciting as well, and we know that we have many people online. Since COP25 in Madrid, the legacy of the Blue COP was this Ocean and Climate Dialogue that was held in December under the SEPSTA. This was the foundation for greater discussion, and since 2019 we have moved forward in the Ocean and Climate Nexus. We have looked at the updated NDCs, for instance, and over 80 countries have included ocean-related measures in their NDCs. Although at the EU level there is no mention of the ocean in the EU NDC, there is also a very important fact, is that the EU for the first time has recognized and mentioned removals, which directly references carbon sinks. So there is room for progress, there is room for improvements, and we know that forests and oceans are also a priority of the EU. So we have gone a long way, and today at COP26 we also need to discuss how to institutionalize this Ocean and Climate Nexus. How do we take into account the conclusions of the Ocean and Climate Dialogue and how we see nature, and not just the ocean, but nature in general has been very prominent at this COP. How do we make sure that this is also the case in the COP26 decision? How do we make sure that we achieve the objectives of the Paris Agreement, not just by finding the money, which is the crux of all issues, but still, the other leg that we need to stand on is the carbon sinks, and we need to preserve our carbon sinks. So with this, I want to thank you, and I want to wish you a very good event, and I hope that you have fun with our moderator, Rémi Parmentier.
So good morning. I'm Rémi Parmentier, the Secretary of the Because the Ocean Initiative. Thank you, Lorelei. Thank you, Commissioner Sinkevicius and all your team in Brussels and here in Glasgow. Thank you, Teresa Ribera, Vice Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister of Spain. We're very glad to have you, and we have several speakers that I will introduce later, experts, ocean experts, blue experts. And let's start with the Commissioner who is speaking with us from Brussels. Commissioner, can you hear us?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. First of all, of course, thank you to Lorelei for your kind introduction, and of course, welcome to everyone to the third edition of the EU Ocean Day. In fact, one of my first major events as Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries was COP25, the Blue COP, as it was called. So I got a pretty good introduction into the importance of the ocean in the context of climate change right from the start of my mandate. It was also around the time of the IPCC special report on the ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate. That report, together with the decision made at COP25 to convene a dedicated dialogue on ocean and climate change, have established a firm connection between the ocean and climate communities, breaking the silos and which really existed before. And that was nearly 2 years ago. Since then, I have had the opportunity to meet many of you, the ocean community present today on a number of occasions. And my first message is, of course, a warm thank you. Thank you for your valuable actions and, of course, commitment over the last months and years. And you are a true warriors for the ocean and climate issue, and you can count on the EU to remain your brother in arms. I don't need to tell you that we will have a lot of work to do in the coming years. Because based on the latest data released by Copernicus, 2011-2020 was the warmest decade recorded, with 2020 the warmest year on record for Europe. The most worrying data concerns the Arctic, reaching to over 6 degrees Celsius above average. And these adverse temperature raises are not only signs of an ailing planet, but also of an ailing ocean. At least 14% of coral reefs are gone. And that's because of climate change. Marine species are disappearing at twice the rate of those on land. Over the last 40 years, the Arctic has lost an ice area of about 6 times the size of Germany. And I could go on, but reaching climate neutrality is crucial to keep our ocean healthy, or better, to restore its health. The European Union has set its target of climate neutrality by 2050 into law. We also have agreed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% within the next decade. And we adopted a few months ago our Fit for 55 package to meet that objective. Behind those targets and percentages lays a formidable challenge. To give you an example, last year, when COVID-19 economic and social activities were disrupted due to COVID-19 worldwide, greenhouse gas emissions fell by nearly 7%. Well, UNEP has estimated that the world needs to cut carbon emissions by 7.6% per year for the next decade to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. In other words, we would need the equivalent of a global lockdown every year until 2030 to stay on track to reach our commitments and avoid disastrous impacts of climate change. Of course, we don't need to close down our economies, thankfully, but we have to transform them. In Europe, we call this shift the European Green Deal. It is our future growth strategy and compass backed up by sound science and economics to help us reach a decarbonized and circular economy by 2050 with zero pollution and the recovery of nature at its heart. And we are moving fast implementing that Green Deal. In less than 2 years, we have adopted a new biodiversity strategy for 2030, which will help put Europe's biodiversity on the path to recovery by 2030, including transforming at least 30% of Europe's lands and seas into effectively managed protected areas. We are also engaged in promoting the 30 for 30 objective worldwide ahead of CBD COP15. And we want areas beyond national jurisdiction to be included in this objective. We are seeking for a final agreement on the new High Seas Treaty, so-called BBNJ agreement, and look very much forward to the conclusions of the negotiations in 2022. One key deliverable of our biodiversity strategy is the designation of new Antarctic marine protected areas. In the first State of the Union address in 2020, President von der Leyen committed to using all of EU's diplomatic strength to broker an agreement. Our proposal is to establish 2 new large-scale MPAs, one in East Antarctica and another in the Weddell Sea. If approved, those marine protected areas would protect an area of 3.2 million square kilometers, which is about the size of India. That would constitute a historic act of environmental protection and a great contribution to the 30 for 30 target. Over the last 2 years, we have managed to increase the number of co-sponsors from 2 to 9. I have put a lot of personal effort in that achievement, but the reality is that we still have to overcome the resistance of some countries. But we will keep fighting to protect this fragile yet essential part of our planet. And the same can be said about other polar area, and that is, of course, the Arctic. We know that the climate crisis is hitting the Arctic particularly hard. Temperatures are rising much faster than elsewhere. Sea and land ice are melting, and permafrost is thawing. This has a knock-on effect on the rest of the planet. That's why just last month, we adopted our new EU Arctic policy. We want to help shape a more sustainable Arctic, reaping the benefits of the green and blue transitions to the advantage of local and indigenous communities. Through our new policy, we want to reduce black carbon emissions. We will promote sustainable shipping. We will set the highest environmental standards for obtaining raw materials. And yes, we will work with all interested parties to keep oil, coal, and gas in the ground, in the Arctic and elsewhere. There is truly no credible alternative. Now, coming back to the point, I started with the close link between oceans and climate. Well, nowhere is this link closer than in the blue economy, for good and for bad. The blue economy is the first to witness the ocean changing as a result of climate change and to bear the costs. Admittedly, the sector is not without responsibility either. Maritime transport, fishing, coastal tourism, every single player in the blue economy has to reduce its CO2 and environmental footprint, sometimes drastically. But at the same time, the blue economy will be crucial in our effort to find clean, renewable, low-carbon solutions for the mainstream economy. Offshore renewables, biodegradable plastics, green ports, low-impact food. There is so much potential, so much innovation going on, and to open up that potential and foster that innovation, we launched in May a new European approach to the sustainable blue economy with new actions and new targets. And we are encouraging our coastal member states to invest in blue-green solutions as a way to recover from the crisis and make their economies future-proof. The blue economy also plays a role in climate adaptation and improving coastal resilience. Green infrastructure in coastal areas, seaweeds, oyster reefs, natural barriers not just helps protecting coastlines from the risk of erosion and flooding, it also helps preserve biodiversity and landscape, in turn supporting sustainable tourism and the coastal economy. So we will invest in this green infrastructure and make it part of our transformation of coastal areas and coastal economies. And this new approach to the blue economy is complemented by a 500 million euro R&D mission called Restore Our Ocean and Waters by 2030, as well as by a host of ocean literacy initiatives to raise societal awareness about the climate urgency and the contribution of oceans. The recent pledging campaign, Make EU Blue, is a good example. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to share those few initiatives, new initiatives with you to explain what we have done, what we are doing to turn a Green Deal into reality on land and, of course, at sea. We are progressing well, but there is still loads of work to do, and we are not resting on our laurels, taking the new actions at an incredible pace. And I strongly invite all other countries, companies, organizations, and of course individuals to do the same. Climate change is the biggest threat of our generation, far bigger than COVID, to be honest. And it can only be tackled if we are working together. And I hope that COP26 will be remembered as the moment when the world has stopped procrastinating, when we finally looked at the task ahead and got on with it, rather than being defeatist or feeling paralyzed by the immensity of it all. We should feel encouraged by the fact that we can still do something about it. And most of all, we owe it to the new generation and the ones to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's remarkable that we have a commissioner for ocean and the environment, and it's not always been the case in the EU Commission. So, talking of the EU, one of the pillars of the EU is the EU Commission, of course, but the Council, the members, it's a members-driven organization, and we have a climate champion who is also an ocean champion, the Deputy Prime Minister of Spain, Teresa Ribera. Thank you very much, Teresa, for being with us. You have the floor.
My pleasure. It's always my pleasure to be with the ocean community, as it is the case today. And I think it is very good to count on a commissioner like Virginijus Sinkevicius, who has understood and promoted a strong action on the ocean protection. And I think that today there are at least 4 or 5 very important messages to share with you all and to get your feedback on these ideas. The first of them being the nexus between climate and the ocean, that you know very well, and we come from the previous COP a long time ago in Madrid, almost 2 years ago, which was called the Blue COP. It is true, and I think that the effort of the ocean community to work within the climate context comes from far ago, even far ago, in the preparatory work towards Paris, it was very clear that the ocean deserves a much better position in the climate discussions. This is very important because we know that it is a thermostat, it is a reservoir, it is part of the climate system. We know all of that. But it cannot stay just at the factual description on why it is important to work together. It deserves the treatment of a treasury. It deserves a fight, so to facilitate clear action to protect the ocean and to have a much more wise understanding of the both references, the climate and the ocean. And I think that here we still have much work to get that being done and being part of the discussion, to raise the bar within the climate conversations. The forest did manage to get this space, and we need to get this space for the ocean. What about the cover decision from the president? Is it a good place to introduce with strength enough why the ocean matters and what type of references we would like to be seen from the stocktake exercise in 2023 till the national contributions coming from every single country? That's my first comment. The second comment is the national action. You have mentioned that, and I think that this is very important. You say that in the NDC being submitted by the European Union, there is no reference to the ocean. So what is the role to be played by the ocean when talking about mitigation, when talking about adaptation and resilience, and how we can perform better? And I think that that is a second question to be managed. Even if there are NDCs where the ocean is reflected, I think that there is much room for improvement. So this is something that we also need to tackle and to improve, to push forward. I think that the European Union is making a great work in order to expand the understanding of how to tackle the ocean and, as the Commissioner was saying, the blue economy. To my mind, we should be talking about a blue New Deal, not only a Green New Deal. I think that it is not only blue economy that we need to talk about, it is much more. We talk about biodiversity and ecosystems, we talk about climate system, we talk about social welfare, because there are many people living from and for the ocean or in the coastal areas. We talk about civil protection. We talk about so many things that I think that investing in a Blue New Deal could be a good reference for the European Union. And then there is the external dimension. Being in the European pavilion, I think that we also need to talk about the external dimension and the role that the European Union should be playing in different fora. We know that the conversations about trade sometimes look a little bit more difficult than we would like to see, even if we are optimistic on how this can evolve. We expect a positive result from the negotiations on the protection of the biodiversity beyond the national jurisdictions, but it is taking longer than what we could have liked it. The Commissioner was talking about the Antarctic, and this is unpleasant. I mean, I think it is a shame not to have been able to get this deal being done now in the last CAMLR discussions, even to have a clear commitment to reach an agreement for the next session. I think that we need to work harder on that, and I think that we need to state loud and clear why this is unacceptable, why it is important to keep a much more clear reference into this discussion. And finally, as far as it relates to us, to Spain, I think that I have to say that we are committed not only to increase the level of protection of the ocean and to get this 30% goal, which is, of course, is a reference. It's not that this is the must, but I think that it is good to have some references to explain why and what are the goals that we want to achieve in a certain moment. But also to work in the European context. We will be chairing the European Union, being the presidency of the Council in 2023, and I think that we need to prepare this conversation on the blue agenda from now onwards if we want to successfully support a Fit for 55 package where the biodiversity, including the marine biodiversity and the protection of the ocean, is properly treated. And eventually, if we are not able to get better results before, to be sure that the international context, in the multilateral context, in the UN context, we get what we would like to see. Not only the climate agenda dealing with the ocean, but also on biodiversity or in the Arctic and the Antarctic discussions. So those could be the main references. Then I think that there are many other things that connect, that are treated through regional treaties, through regional cooperation, where still my impression is that we need to make full use and to spread the expertise and the knowledge to facilitate proper discussions among countries. I think that it is always something that looks complicated for many officials in governments to understand to what extent they can take risk or not. And then the discussions, well, can be certainly being improved. So those would be my general comments.
Thank you very much, Teresa. You've used the words clear commitment. Maybe I can make a suggestion. When you discuss Antarctica, learn how to say these two words in Chinese and in Russian. When you discuss the Arctic, learn these two words in Norwegian. And when we are here at the COP discussing text on the ocean in the COP decision, maybe you should learn these two words in German. So we're going to have, we'll have a discussion, a roundtable with experts. I know you have to rush to the EU coordination meeting now, where you're going to be a ocean advocate with others, but outstanding ocean advocate. What is your expectation of a roundtable with experts? They're here. You know them. We have Anna Queiroz from the Plymouth Marine Laboratory, Sylvie from the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation, Joanna Post from the Secretariat, and online Hans Otto Partner from the IPCC, who you know very well as Manuel Barange from the UNFAO. What's your expectation from beyond a talk shop, basically?
So first, I will need this capacity building on language from your side. So to be sure to make full use of all the opportunities. But then what I think is that we still need to be very practical, very pragmatic. We need to translate in a kind of concrete references, guidelines. Sometimes it is difficult. It is not. I'm convinced about the willingness of most of our colleagues in different governments to improve the protection of the ocean, and they understand the connection between the ocean and the climate for sure. But then, how we can translate that into concrete action? Sometimes we tend to be very vocal with brands and with pancartas, billboards and banners and so on, and that is fantastic. It is good to denounce, it is good to criticize, it is good to claim for action, but we also need to translate the claim into concrete steps to get the action done. And this requires being brave and being wise. So if you can help providing how to be brave and wise in concrete terms, that is very, very helpful. Okay?
That's a good lesson. And of course, I remember that when you started, you were almost the age of Greta. So that's, okay. You have a consistency. And thank you so much for being with us. And thank you to the Commissioner.
Thank you to the Commissioner. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Good luck at the EU meeting. Okay. And now we're going to have this roundtable. So Anna Queiroz, Plymouth Marine Laboratory, Sylvie Goyer, Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation, Joanna Post, UNFCCC Secretariat, and online we have Hans Otto Portner from the IPCC and Manuel Barange from the UNFAO in Rome. So Hans Otto, can you hear me? So you can hear me, I suppose, but we can't hear you.
I can hear you. I can hear you very well. Okay. Good morning, everybody in Glasgow.
Good, Hans Otto. So you're co-chair of the IPCC. Thank you for joining us. You're extremely busy, we all know, with the preparation of the IPCC sixth assessment report. You were also the co-chair of the special report of the IPCC on the ocean and cryosphere, which was launched in Monaco in September 2019, and which set the scenes for the Blue COP in Madrid under the Chilean presidency. So tell us, Hans Otto Portner, have you seen policy change since you published that report in 2019?
Well, thanks a lot for this challenging question, Remy. Certainly, I would say yes, there has been a little bit of action and response. There is certainly increased appreciation of the ocean in the policy arena, including UNFCCC, as we've heard from Lorelei and from Teresa Ribera. But certainly there is not yet enough appreciation, both formally and politically, and certainly not enough action. Certainly not the rapid action needed to solve or better stop further exacerbation of the problems that are evolving in the ocean. With progressive climate change, just to give an example, the biodiversity decline continues. With a progressive removal of higher marine life from the tropics, species move to higher latitudes, biodiversity is declining, biomass and fisheries are affected. So the ocean suffers from continued emissions, which cause warming, acidification, and oxygen loss, as we all know. Biodiversity problems are essentially and in principle similar as on land, and also carbon storage mechanisms are important in the ocean as they are on land. And I think this connection may need to be emphasized to help us bring the ocean further into the political process. So our ecosystems are vulnerable to climate and currently actually losing the capacity to support us in what we need them for, in mitigation and adaptation action. We are learning that the blue carbon systems actually may have a larger capacity than previously thought. Seagrasses, mangroves, kelp are known to us. And then recently we learned about sediments and healthy standing stocks of whales and fish being important, and the latter being important in carbon export to the sediments. All of this will only work if we can stop emissions from fossil fuels. We now see, in addition, and we emphasize this in our recent collaboration with IPBES, that climate crisis, biodiversity, and societal crisis are intertwined, and that we need coordinated action, meaning transformation across many sectors to reach sustainability. So there is a lot to do, and this is a large call to action.
Thank you very much, Hans Otto. So you said stop emissions, number one. But this week, and very briefly perhaps, but this week, what is your advice to decision makers and stakeholders here in Glasgow?
Well, as you said, Remy, and the fate of the ocean and its ecosystems and services is tied to the core of the negotiations. Reduce emissions to the extent that we keep warming at 1.5. So keeping 1.5 within reach, which is one of the mottos of the negotiations, is very important. And those who still have the brakes on this should really loosen them and allow the respective decisions to be made, because 1.5 is a warming degree which will allow many ecosystems and species to adapt, except maybe for the warm water coral reefs in many areas. But also rapid actions should be implemented with low-hanging fruit being first, such as, for example, the reduction of methane emissions from leakage processes. The pushing, then further on, pushing for a network of MPAs, of marine protected areas on 30, better 50% of the ocean should also be supported by the COP decisions. So we need to strengthen the biosphere as part of the adaptation efforts needed to build resilience for humans and biodiversity, which will strengthen the blue carbon systems as well, and provide a long-term perspective for stabilizing the climate. But there's one important point I wish to make. It would be very premature to use ecosystems in the accounting. We need to hammer this point into the heads of policymakers who do just that, set percent emissions reductions by including the carbon to be stored in ecosystems. And our ecosystems are weakened by climate change. So we cannot use them as an excuse to keep emissions up. They are vulnerable to climate and currently losing capacity to support mitigation. They need strengthening first by the respective adaptation actions before they can help us mitigate and thereby stabilize the climate long term. That is an important point to be considered in the negotiation.
So thank you very much. So in other words, no cheating. That's your message, right? Now we also have Manuel Barange. Can you hear me, Manuel? You're in Rome at the headquarters of UNFAO. You're the director of fisheries and agriculture at UNFAO, and you're also a climate scientist by training. I remember you telling me. So you coordinated a massive piece of work in 2018 on fisheries and aquaculture adaptation. So 3 years later, do you see progress, Manuel?
Good morning, everybody. It's very nice to see you and very nice to talk to you here from Rome. Thank you for the question. Well, I think that the first thing that I would say is that we have made a significant progress because the evidence is so much stronger than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And so the document that we published 3 years ago, which I have it here actually.
Massive, I said.
And the IPCC work has given countries a lot of confidence on the evidence. We are not that strong in terms of being able to predict, but we are able to project and give indications of the consequences of certain projections. And this has been very useful for countries to understand that action is needed or was needed. We have been doing a lot of work with countries, particularly on adaptation. So, just to give you a few examples, we've been working with fishermen in Senegal on replanting mangrove forest in the places where they used to collect oysters, and they used to remove the mangroves in order to get to the oysters. Now they're replanting the mangroves and teaching them to collect the oysters without damaging the mangroves. Fish are rebuilding there, and of course, the blue carbon benefits of the mangroves are well known, and mangroves as well help in terms of floods and protection from the coastlines. In the Eastern Caribbean, we are helping countries develop management plans for sargassum fields, as you know, have expanded partially as a result of climate change. In Malawi, we are working with fishermen there, developing deep pond technology to help them develop climate-smart aquaculture practices in the lake. In Myanmar, we have developing with the government 120 community integrated management plan, climate-smart management plan that includes things like mangrove-friendly aquaculture, rice fish aquaculture, integrated management plans, in other words. So that is a result of the work that we did and that we have been doing, so many scientists have been doing for a couple of decades now in trying to make sure that the evidence is strong enough and therefore that countries realize that action is needed. But I think that what is very important is when it comes to adaptation is, well, a couple of things. First, recognize that the Paris Agreement is expecting adaptation to take place in a way that does not compromise food security. That we are expecting a 50-50 between mitigation and adaptation options, and we are very far from that ratio. And finally, that we cannot leave communities to find their own adaptation methodologies without support. And this is because you can lead with maladaptation. The adaptations of one country cannot result on the adaptation potential of a neighbor becoming minimized. There has to be some level of coordination, and that's what the UN agencies and many other organizations are doing, trying to set up frameworks for adaptation so that we actually make sure that we look after the adaptation needs of the different countries at regional level. Very important as well, adaptation is place and context-based, and it has to be co-designed and co-delivered by those that depend from the ocean. And we cannot be sort of top-down telling people what to do, because those communities are the custodians of the oceans, and if we actually work with them, the solutions will be much more effective.
Thank you very much, Manuel. At this point of the conversation, I should mention for the people in the audience and people here also that we hope there will be some opportunities to have a dialogue with people listening. And there is a system called Slido, slido.com, you see. I'm not, as you've noticed, I'm not from the internet generation, so I'm not exactly sure how it works, but you young people and people who are technically savvy, you will know how to use Slido, so please do. Manuel, when we talk ocean, climate, and biodiversity, there is that expression that which is at the core of the Because the Ocean initiative that was launched at COP21. It's break the silos. So you're the UN guy here on this panel. How do you break the silos at the level of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals? So for example, SDG 2, zero hunger, or anger? Both. Well, SDG 13 on climate, SDG 14 on ocean. Have you got that sort of breaking the silo culture entering into the UN now?
Absolutely. I think that certainly when it comes to FAO, the breaking of the silos is our daily work. After all, FAO is custodian of about 21 different indicators of the SDGs, and those cut across all those SDGs that you mentioned and more. And we know that we cannot achieve one SDG without the other. SDG 2 is our core, of course, because our mandate is to end hunger. Hunger, not anger, but it's absolutely crucial. Just remember, that we have 811 million people undernourished today, and that's more than 100 than we had before COVID. So just COVID has created more than 100, or has moved more than 100 people into a situation of hunger, which has essentially wiped progress after decades of fighting against hunger. But we can't fight against hunger without looking at the other SDGs, because, for example, if you destroy ecosystems in the process of producing food, you're going to end hunger for a very short period of time. So it's very obvious that there is a connection, and we have that very clear. The UN Food System Summit that took place just a month and a bit ago, was very clear on that. It looked at food systems transformation in the way that we think about food, that we produce food, that we transform food, that we eat, and we even think about food. So this is already part of that breaking the silos of connecting with all the others. So, for example, we have now, as an emergence of the Food System Summit, an aquatic foods coalition that is very much entrenched on that need of making sure that aquatic foods are recognized not just for the contribution to food security and nutrition, but the contribution to jobs, and also the process of looking after the environment that produces those resources. So I think that's very, very clear. In FAO, for example, we have launched a Blue Transformation Initiative that is trying to precisely do that, looking at the benefits of fisheries and aquaculture for SDG 2, SDG 1, SDG 14, SDG 15, and others as a single priority package. But of course, these things are not easy because governments are divided by ministries. I just remember that. We have different governments and different ministries, and their jobs are divided, and we have to make sure that we speak to the different ministries in countries so that those cross-cutting issues are taken care of. The cross-cutting areas of work are possibly the most exciting in terms of finding solutions. How do we do SDG 2 and 14 at the same time? 1 and 2 at the same time. That is work in progress, and I think that the UN has that very, very clearly in their minds.
Thank you. And on these silos within governments, I mentioned that it's a significant progress to have a commissioner in the EU who has the title of Environment and Ocean. Also, the Deputy Prime Minister of Spain is Minister for the Ecological Transition, so that's all good. And one thing, Manuel, with Teresa, he made some suggestions of how she should learn the words clear commitment in certain languages. I think it would be good to learn the expression break the silos in Hindi. Because we're getting very close at the end of this month, very close to the World Trade Organization ministerial conference, and I know you're on board with this. We hope that there can be finally an agreement on the elimination of harmful fisheries subsidies, but maybe the words break the silos should be pronounced in Hindi. So now Anna Queiroz. So it's interesting that you are speaking after Manuel, because Manuel, before joining the UNFAO, he was with you at the Plymouth Marine Laboratory, and this is really, in my memory, the Plymouth Marine Laboratory that gave the first signals of alarm about ocean acidification, yes, which is increasing due to increased CO2 concentrations in the ocean. So the situation is worse than what your laboratory had originally envisaged. So are you depressed? Are you, tell us.
Good morning, Rémi. Thank you for this interesting question. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to be here. It is indeed a starking situation that we find ourselves in. As we know, we've been hearing this week in the report of the IPCC and colleagues from around the world, it is very strongly highlighted that the ocean environment is changing because of increased emissions, and this leads indeed to ocean acidification, ocean warming, deoxygenation, changes in circulation. And this indeed is a magnificent challenge, a very large challenge for the species and habitats that we want to protect, but also the ones that we want to harvest, and also the habitats that have a chance to provide us with these nature-based solutions that we've been hearing about so much that can contribute to climate change mitigation, like carbon sequestering habitats. If we look, a lot of my work and the work of the colleagues at Plymouth Marine Laboratory is to look at the projections for the ocean, and we know that these impacts are not going to come in the distant future. Indeed, in many areas of the ocean, they're happening now. And if we look at Europe, for instance, in the next 2 decades, we see actually quite striking alarms. The climate signal is emerging in large proportions of our exclusive economic zone, and this presents a huge challenge, not just for the ecosystem, but also for the blue economy, as the Commissioner was just describing. But it's also important that in this dialogue of the COP, we also remember that climate change, because we tend to talk about the long-term trends and really the hotspots of climate change, where we see the ecosystems moving into a state that is outside of their natural variability, that is really outside of what we see today, that really imperils these important ecosystem functions that the ocean delivers for us, like carbon sequestration. But it's also important to remember that climate change, whilst being a global process, is not a homogeneous process, and that there are areas of the ocean where in the short term we will see actually climate change being much more milder, these climate refugia. And the important thing for us, for the ocean, to remain hopeful is that we are working with, especially in Europe, which has a long tradition of research funding and of working with policymakers in being responsive to their needs, that we are delivering the science, like the models that Manuel was just talking about, that help us identify where these refugia are, so that between now and the point where we actually reach net zero, we are actually able to bring these sites within protection and prevent them from destruction. They are the seed banks for the future generation.
Thank you very much, Anna. We still have a couple of speakers and not so much time, so we'll try to be quick. It was very interesting to hear you. Maybe we'll come back to you later if we have time. Sylvie Goyer, Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. You're one of the patrons of the Because the Ocean initiative, and together with Prince Albert, we launched the third Because the Ocean declaration on the 31st of October. So tell us, why a new declaration 2 years after the Blue Cup?
Thank you, Remy, for the question, and very good to be here, acknowledging my distinguished panelists. It's great to be with you. Yes, Remy, a third declaration. Let me remind, we had a first one already at COP21 in Paris. So really recognizing that ocean had to be pushed further into the UNFCCC. Now, the first one called for an IPCC report on ocean, and we got that. Called for SDG 14 conference, we got that. Now, the second declaration was trying to be more pragmatic, like Teresa was saying. We called for increasing consideration of ocean in the NDCs, which are the instruments of the convention. Now, why a third one? Well, we've gained ground already on the ocean and climate, as you can see, and this blue zone is full of ocean. It's truly a blue zone. There's a lot of ocean action, a lot of ocean cooperation, and that's heartening. So things have progressed a lot on the action front, and I'm very comforted on that. Now, on the negotiation side, I mean, as you know, it's still a bit of a challenge. So this third declaration is really here and it's been signed already by up to 20 countries here on site in Monaco and growing. Like-minded countries are pushing to get ocean language into the COP decision. We hope that we'll get there. We're advocating to get, ocean solutions into other sectors, like the greening the shipping sector, like was mentioned before. And finally, maybe, and more importantly, calling for more of a nexus approach, the link, the breaking the silo you mentioned, making the link with other conventions, and we have CBD 15 in sight, of course. And so that's the ask, and just a call to keep advocating for the ocean. Peter Thompson is not here, but he would say that ocean action is climate action. So that's why we launched a third declaration together with Chile, Spain, and of course the Principality of Monaco.
Thank you. And of course, those who want to know more about that declaration and the work of the Because the Ocean initiative can go to the website, 3Ws, becausetheocean.org. Thank you very much, Sylvie. And one last speaker. On board any vessel, there is always people in the engine room, and at the UNFCCC, that's members of the Secretariat that are in the engine room, and Joanna Post, Secretariat, you're Madame Ocean, right? In the Secretariat, we can summarize your role like this. You organized the COP25 mandated Ocean and Climate Dialogue last year under difficult circumstances due to the pandemic, so congratulations. What were the main takeaways from the Ocean and Climate Dialogue that took place at the end of last year, and do you expect that there will be one or more recurring Ocean and Climate Dialogue as a result of the discussions that are taking place this week in Glasgow?
Thank you, Remy, and thank you, panelists. Pleasure to be here today. I know where time is tight, so I think I have 3 points here, really, coming out of the Blue COP coming out of the Ocean and Climate Dialogue and thinking about this week. And of course, the Secretariat has a neutral position. We cannot make comments on the outcomes, but we can certainly support the process. So first of all, action, acknowledging, sorry, my first A is acknowledge. So we know that with the work that's going on by Because the Ocean, we heard from Hans and Manuel about the massive scientific evidence that's also came out this year with the Working Group 1 report from the IPCC. And at Blue COP, parties acknowledged all of this massive information and the importance of the ocean climate nexus. So that's my first point. Dialogue. We had a dialogue last year, as you said. It actually ended up being a virtual dialogue. We had a massive amount of inputs from parties into that dialogue. There were 4 very clear parts to that. There was dialogue on how to strengthen adaptation mitigation within the UNFCCC process itself, how to strengthen it across the UN framework, how to strengthen it at national level, and of course how to support that action, the finance and other support needed. So dialogue is really important, as we found out today, and as many of us are meeting for the first time in almost 2 years. And then the final point is really solutions and breaking silos. So I suppose I can say S for both. So A, acknowledging D, dialogue, and S, solutions and silos. As Sylvie mentioned, there are massive amounts of solutions out there. The ocean space, of course, needs ambition. So that's the priority solution, as Hans mentioned. It needs ambition, and that's one of the COP26 presidents' key messages here in Glasgow. It also needs, it is a solution space in itself. It's a space for mitigation, for siting mitigation, whether that be reducing emissions from shipping, from fisheries, siting renewable energy offshore, and the UK, where we are, is actually quite a leader in that. So that's a solution space for mitigation. It's also a solution space for adaptation. And we think about what Hans was saying about ecosystems and the importance of nature. So you could even say ocean climate biodiversity nexus as a solution space there. And that really is all of the topics that are being brought into the negotiations this week by parties, and to really think about at the dialogue, what came out very strongly are messages that parties need to take forward to think about how to strengthen action on mitigation, adaptation, ocean. And this is where we're heading this week. And I would like to be a person that has a glass half full, always an optimistic attitude that we can really will work towards strengthening ocean climate biodiversity action moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna. If I'm allowed to say, your presence, your role as ocean focal point in the Secretariat since, I remember, maybe since Katowice, a few years ago, has really made a difference for us ocean advocates. So thank you very much, and we look forward to continue to work with you. We have people in the room. I would like to acknowledge in particular our friends from Chile, of course the people from the Ocean and Climate Dialogue, Climate Platform, and others. I mentioned Slido. They gave me a tablet, but it just, I don't know, it went blank. So if anyone here would like to say something, I see Carol from the lab, but I see also a specific question from somebody on Slido, so it works. To Anna, how would you design a climate smart MPA? I think it's a very good question. We don't have much time, so
very quickly. Yes, so Manuel mentioned we have very good models for this at the moment, and the important thing that we need to really focus on is that climate change, as I was saying, is not a homogeneous process, and that there are sites in the ocean that will be climate resilient or indeed have improved conditions, at least in the short term. Climate smart MPAs are MPAs that adapt these changing patterns of biodiversity in the ocean, and species and habitats move as a response to climate change. And so we do have the models now that allow us to identify where these sites are, where biodiversity may continue to occur for the time being, and that's what climate smart MPAs are, that they're MPAs that adapt to climate change. So we are doing this, in fact, in Europe.
This is very exciting. Thank you, Anna, for your work. someone else from the Plymouth lab, Carol?
Carol Turley from Plymouth Marine Laboratory. It's to Joe, actually. From the Ocean Dialogue, you had these wonderful recommendations to the presidency of COP26. Of those, which do you think will be most successful, have a higher chance of being, risen up and taken on board?
So very quickly, you respond.
Dialogue.
Okay, dialogue. So dialogue. I think that's a key word that we take on board. Thank you very much. I think it was a rich conversation. Thank you, of course, to the Commissioner and to Teresa Ribera. I have only time for a couple of sentences to wrap up. So maybe here it is, Teresa Ribera mentioned the youth and, the people with the banners, as someone who's been an ocean advocate for many years, many decades even, I always say that although the trends are not good, clearly they're not good, we have not wasted our time. Because the ocean would be in even worse situation if we had not taken action all those years. So we're all in it together, and let's continue. Let's act if we want the ocean to be safe. For us to be safe, we have to continue to act to keep the ocean safe. Thank you very much.